with another tale from Grimm's Fairy Tale. Publishers are Ward, Lock and Company Limited, London and Melbourne. So the name of the story is One Eye, Two Eyes and Three Eyes. There was a woman who had three daughters, of whom the eldest was called One Eye because she had only one eye in the middle of her forehead. The next one, Two Eyes, because she had two eyes like other people. And the youngest, Three Eyes, because she had three eyes. And the third was likewise in her case in the middle of her forehead. But because Two Eyes did not look any different from other human beings, her mother and sisters could not bear her. They said to her, "You, with your two eyes, are no better than the common folk. You do not belong to us." They pushed her about and threw her old clothes and gave her nothing to eat but the scraps left over, and made her suffer in every way they could. It happened that Two Eyes had to go out into the field to tend the goat, but was very hungry because her sisters had given her so little to eat. So she sat down on a ridge and began to weep, and wept so much that two little streams flowed from her eyes. And once, when she looked up in her distress, a woman stood by her who asked, "Two Eyes, why do you weep?" Two Eyes answered, "Why should I not cry? Just because I have two eyes like other people, my sisters and my mother cannot bear me, push me about from one corner to another, throw dish clouts at me, and only give me the scraps left over to eat. Today they have given me so little that I am still quite hungry." The wise lady replied, "Little Two Eyes, dry your face. I will give you something, and that is you need not feel hungry any more. Just say to your goat, 'Little kid, bleat, bleat, little table I would eat.' And there will appear a freshly laid table with delicious food on it, of which you may eat as much as you like, and when you are satisfied and do not require the table any longer, just say, 'Little kid, bleat, bleat, little kid, bleat, my dear, little table, disappear.' And then it will vanish before your eyes." With that, the wise woman went away. Two Eyes thought, "I must try at once and see what she says is true, for I am so hungry," and said, "Little kid, bleat, bleat, little table I would eat." Hardly had the words been spoken before a table stood there covered with a little white cloth, and on it a plate with a knife and fork and a silver spoon, and the most delicious eatables spread around, smoking and still hot as though they had just come from the kitchen. Then Two Eyes said, the shortest grace she knew, "The Lord make us truly thankful, amen," and and he ate heartily. When she had had enough, she repeated what the wise woman had taught her, "Little kid, bleat, my dear, little table, disappear." The little table and everything on it at once disappeared. "There is a nice sort of housekeeping," thought Two Eyes, and was quite happy and cheerful. In the evening, when she came home with her goat, she found a little earthen bowl of food that the sisters had placed for her, but she did not touch it. The next day she went out again with her goat and left the few crusts set aside for her. The first and second time the sisters noticed nothing, but when it happened every time, they remarked upon it and said, "Something must be wrong with Two Eyes. She leaves her food untouched every time, yet she used to eat up all that was provided for her. She must have found some by other means." In order to arrive at the truth of the matter, One Eye resolved to accompany Two Eyes when she drove the goat out to the pasture, and to keep watch on her movements and see whether anyone brought her food and drink. When Two Eyes was ready to start, One Eye stepped up to her and said, "I will go with you into the field and see that the goat is well tended and brought to a place where there is enough water." But Two Eyes perceived that what One Eye meant to do, and drove the goat out into the long grass, saying, "Come, One Eye, we will sit down together. I want to sing you something." One Eye sat down, tired from the unaccustomed walk and the heat of the sun, and Two Eyes sang over and over again, "One Eye, are you waking? One Eye, are you sleeping?" And then One Eye shut her eye and went off to sleep. When Two Eyes saw that One Eye slept soundly and could not discover anything, she said, "Little kid, bleed, bleed, little table I would eat." And seating herself at a table, she ate and drank till she was satisfied. Then she cried again, "Little kid, bleed, my dear, little table disappear," and everything disappeared immediately. Two Eyes now awoke One Eye and said, "One Eye, you tried to keep watch but fall asleep, while the goat might stray all over the place. Come, we will go home." Then they went home, and Two Eyes again left her little dish untouched. One Eye could not inform her mother why she would not eat, and gave as an excuse, "I fell asleep out of doors." The next day the mother said to Three Eyes, "This time you must go and watch whether Two Eyes eats out of doors, and whether anyone brings her food and drink, for she must eat and drink secretly." So Three Eyes stepped up to Two Eyes and said, "I will go with you too, and see whether the goat is well tended and given enough water." But Two Eyes saw her motive and drove the goat out into long grass and said, "We will sit down over there, Three Eyes. I want to sing you something." Three Eyes sat down, tired with the walk and the heat of the sun, and Two Eyes sang over again the same little song, "Three Eyes, are you waking?" But instead of singing as she ought, "Three Eyes, are you sleeping?" she sang from carelessness, "Two Eyes, are you sleeping?" and continued, "Three Eyes, are you waking? Two Eyes, are you sleeping?" Three Eyes then shut two of her eyes and slept, but the third, to which the little rhyme was not addressed, did not sleep. Three Eyes did indeed shut it, but only out of cunning, as though it too was asleep, but it blinked and could see everything quite well. And as Two Eyes imagined Three Eyes to be fast asleep, she said her little verse, "Little kid, bleed, bleed, little table I would eat." Then ate and drank to her heart's content, and afterwards bade the table be gone. "Little kid, bleed, my dear, little table disappear." But Three Eyes had seen everything. Two Eyes came up to her and woke her, saying, "Ah, Three Eyes, have you been asleep? You can watch while I come. We will go home." When they got home, Two Eyes again ate nothing, and Three Eyes said to the mother, "I know why the conceited creature does not eat. When she says to the goat out of doors, 'Little kid, bleed, bleed, little table I would eat,' a table stands before her covered with delicious food, much better than we have. And when she has had enough, she says, 'Little kid, bleed, my dear, little table disappear,' and everything disappears. I saw it all exactly. She sent two of my eyes to sleep with a little rhyme, but the one in my forehead fortunately kept awake." Then the envious mother cried, "Do you want to fare better than we do? You shall wish in vain for the future." She brought a butcher's knife and stuck it into the goat's heart, so that the creature fell dead. When Two Eyes saw that she went out full of sorrow, sat down on the ridge in the field, and shed bitter tears. At once the wise woman appeared again beside her and said, "Little Two Eyes, why do you weep?" "Have I not good reason to cry?" she answered. "The goat that had my little table spread so nicely every day, whenever I repeated your little verse, has been killed by my mother. Now I must again suffer hunger and thirst." The wise woman said, "Two Eyes, I'll give you some good advice. Ask your sisters to give you the dead goat's entrails and bury them in the ground in front of the house door, and it'll bring you luck." With that she disappeared, and Two Eyes went home and said to the sisters, "Dear sisters, give me just something from my goat. I do not ask for anything good, only give me the entrails." Then they laughed and said, "You may have that, if that is all you want." Two Eyes took the entrails and buried them in the evening, when all was quiet in front of the door, accounting to the wise woman's according to the wise women's advice. The next morning, when they all awoke and went out of the front door, there stood a wonderfully fine tree with leaves of silver and fruit of gold hanging between them, and there could certainly have been nothing more beautiful or costlier in the world. But they did not know how the tree had come there in the night. Only Two Eyes noticed that it had grown out of the remains of the goat, for the tree stood exactly on the spot where she had buried them. The mother said to One Eye, "Climb up, my child, and take the fruit off the tree for us." One Eye climbed up, but whenever she tried to take hold of one of the golden apples, the branch slipped out of her hand. And this happened every time, so that she could not break off a single apple, try in whatever position she would. Then the mother said, "Three Eyes, you climb up. You can look round better with your three eyes than One Eye." One Eye scrambled down and Three Eyes climbed up, but Three Eyes was no more successful, and strive as she might, the golden apple swung back. At last the mother became impatient and climbed up herself, but could take hold of the fruit no better than could One Eye or Three Eyes, and always got at the empty air. Two Eyes then said, "I will go up, perhaps I shall fare better." The sisters called out, "You, with your two eyes, what can you do?" But Two Eyes climbed up, and the golden apples did not draw back from her. It was just as though they came towards her hand, so that she could pick off one after the other, and brought down a whole apron full. The mother took them from her, and instead of treating poor Two Eyes any better, the mother and One Eye and Three Eye were so jealous that she alone could pick the fruit, that her lot was even harder than before. It happened once that as they were standing together by the tree, a young knight came by. "Quick, Two Eyes," called the two sisters, "crouch down, that we need not be put to shame by you." And hastily they threw over poor Two Eyes an empty barrel that stood by the tree, and thrust the golden apples she had been picking under it as well. When the knight drew near, he turned out to be a handsome lord. He admired the splendid tree of gold and silver, and said to the sisters, "To whom does this beautiful tree belong? Whoever will give me a branch of it may ask what she likes for it." One Eye and Three Eyes replied that the tree belonged to them, and they much wanted to break him off a bough. They each tried very hard, but could not do it, for the branches and the fruit swung away from them at every effort. Then said the knight, "If it is indeed curious that the tree should belong to you, and yet you have not the power to break off anything from it." They persisted that the tree was their property. But while they were speaking, Two Eyes let a couple of golden apples roll out from under the barrel, so that they ran along to the feet of the knight. For Two Eyes was angry at One Eye and Three Eyes for not speaking the truth. When the knight saw the apples, he was astonished and asked where they came from. One Eye and Three Eyes answered that they had another sister, but she did not let herself be seen, because she had only two eyes like any ordinary person. But the knight wanted to see her, and cried, "Two Eyes, come forward." Thus encouraged, Two Eyes came from under the barrel, and the knight was astonished at her beauty, and said, "You, Two Eyes, can doubtless break me off a branch from the tree." "Yes," replied Two Eyes, "that I can well do, for the tree belongs to me." And climbing up, she broke off a branch with its silver leaves and golden fruit, and handed it to the knight. He then said, "Two Eyes, What shall I give you for it? Ah, answered Two Eyes, I suffer hunger and thirst, sorrow and want from early morn till late at night. If you would take me with you and deliver me, I should be happy. The knight then lifted Two Eyes on his horse and brought her home to his castle. There he gave her beautiful clothes, food, and drink to her heart's content, and because he was so fond of her, he was betrothed to her, and the wedding was held with great rejoicings. When Two Eyes had been taken away by the handsome knight, the two sisters greatly envied her good fortune. Yet we still have the wonderful tree, they thought. Even if we cannot break off any fruit from it, everyone will stop before it and come to us and spread the fame of it. Who knows what we may reap? But by the next morning, the tree had disappeared, and their hopes with it. And when Two Eyes looked out of her little room, she saw to her joy that it stood outside and so had followed her there. Two Eyes lived happily for a long time. Once two poor women came to her at the castle begging for alms. When Two Eyes looked into their faces, she recognized her two sisters, One Eye and Three Eyes, who had fallen into such poverty that they were obliged to wander from door to door seeking their bread. However, Two Eyes bade them welcome and treated them well and cared for them, so that they both regretted from their hearts all the unkindness they had done to their sister in their youth. So I'm sure you enjoyed this lovely story from Grimm's fairy tale.